Hey there, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be cracking open a real classic,
Ooh.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
It's wild how relevant that story still feels today, you know?
Right. It's like she was writing about our modern anxieties.
Totally.
We're going to be exploring excerpts from the novel and seeing why Frankenstein isn't just a spooky story. It's like a reflection of us.
I like that, a
Are
reflection.
you ready to unlock this classic with us?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the novel starts with letters written by Robert Walton,
Okay.
this explorer who's completely obsessed with conquering the North Pole.
Right, right.
And guess who he finds stranded in the Arctic?
Who?
Victor Frankenstein. But he is not the Victor we might imagine.
Oh.
He's a wreck,
Really?
totally consumed by guilt,
Wow.
warning Walton about the dangers of unchecked ambition.
Huh. And this encounter right from the start really sets the stage for the whole thing, right?
It's true.
Victor, this once brilliant scientist, becomes this cautionary example of what happens when ambition goes unchecked. You know, he's totally haunted by what he did by creating this monster.
Yeah, it's like a train wreck. You can't look away from, he created a monster, but you have to know how it all went wrong.
And Shelley is so good at using that suspense to make us confront the dark side of scientific progress, you know?
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, are we making the same mistakes today with all our technological advancements?
It's so true. That's what's so eerie about Frankenstein. It's like looking into a distorted mirror. It reflects our own anxieties about technology.
Totally.
But let's talk about the creature himself for a second.
Okay, yeah.
Because this isn't like your typical Hollywood monster.
Right, not at all. And a lot of interpretations miss this. He's not inherently evil.
Right.
He's complex, he's intelligent, he's capable of learning.
Yeah, and he desperately wants connection and understanding. Like there's this part where he's secretly observing this family and teaching himself about emotions
Oh.
and language. He learns to read.
He wants to be human. He craves that acceptance and love that he sees in that family. And that desire to belong, to be seen for who you are inside. I think we can all relate to that.
100%. It's like that universal feeling of wanting to fit in, but like amplified to the extreme because he's a creature made by a scientist.
Precisely. And that's where Shelley's just brilliant, you know? She makes us feel for this monster even as he's doing all these destructive things.
It's true, and it's heartbreaking because you see how his isolation and rejection just fuel his rage.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how we treat those who are different and how fear and prejudice can create monsters out of anyone.
That's such a good point. Yeah. It makes you think about how we judge based on how people look.
And then there's that moment where the creature confronts Victor and demands that he take responsibility for creating him,
Oh, yeah.
for all the misery he's going through.
That's a huge turning point in the story.
It is.
Because Shelley forces us to ask ourselves who's really responsible for what this creature does, and are we accountable for what we create, even when it becomes monstrous?
Whoa. Okay, we need a minute to process this.
Yeah, that feeling of responsibility, you know, for what we create. It's something people are really grappling with today, especially with technology.
It's true. It's like that old Spider-Man quote, with great power.
Exactly. And to really get that connection, it helps to understand, like, the world Mary Shelley was writing in, it was the early 1800s, right? The Industrial Revolution was happening all around her.
Okay.
Imagine groundbreaking technologies like steam engines and factories, you know, transforming society so fast.
So kind of like everyone being obsessed with the latest phones or AI or whatever.
Exactly. And back then, with all that change, there was this feeling of anxiety. People worried about what these technologies meant. Like, were they losing their humanity? Just like today, some people wonder about, you know, social media and being connected all the time.
It's so interesting how those anxieties are the same, even with different technology. But what about the actual science of her time? Was there anything that influenced her?
Oh, absolutely. One word. Galvanism. It was this huge thing in science.
Galvanism.
Yeah, exploring if you could use electricity to bring dead tissue back to life.
Whoa. They were trying to bring back the dead.
Well, kind of. They were experimenting with electricity and muscles, you know? It's like a very early version of those defibrillator things they use now. But back then, it really captured people's imaginations, you know? This mix of fascination and fear about what science could do.
I bet. It's like something right out of Frankenstein. But there's more to the novel than just the monster part, right?
Right. Shelley wasn't just trying to tell a scary story. She was dealing with these bigger questions about society and ethics, you know? Stuff that was relevant then and now.
We can't forget about her background. She came from a super intellectual, progressive family. Her mom was Mary Wollstonecraft, that famous feminist writer. And her dad was William Godwin, the political philosopher.
That's right. So those ideas about social justice and individual rights were just part of her. When you read Frankenstein, you see those themes everywhere. Like it's about our responsibility to each other, about prejudice, about the need for compassion.
Wow, she was way ahead of her time.
Totally. It's like she could see the ethical problems of the future. Those anxieties we have today about technology, about staying human in this rapidly changing world. She had those too.
So how do those themes actually work in the story? I mean, we talked about Victor's ambition backfiring, but what about the creature's role in all this?
Well, the creature shows what happens because of Victor's actions, right? He's
Yeah.
like a symbol for the possibility of both good and evil, especially when it comes to big scientific discoveries. He doesn't start evil, he wants knowledge, he wants connection.
He just wants someone to understand him. Everyone wants him.
Exactly. But he's judged by how he looks and is denied any kind of dignity. Shelley really shows how prejudice and fear turn someone into what people already think they are. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but in a bad way.
Yeah. That's a really powerful message, especially now when the world feels so divided.
It is. And there's another thing. Remember how Victor just abandons his creation? Like he won't take responsibility as the creator. Makes you think about the ethics of all this scientific advancement, doesn't it?
For sure. It's like someone creates something amazing, but then doesn't think about what comes after, about
Yeah.
supporting it, Like it needs that so it doesn't become destructive.
Exactly. And now, when we're talking about artificial intelligence and changing genes, that quotient of ethical responsibility is huge.
Okay, so we've got ambition, we've got societal prejudice, and then the ethics of it all. Anything else?
Don't forget about nature. It's really important for understanding the deeper meaning of Frankenstein. Think about the settings. The Arctic, those huge Alps mountains. Shelley uses these amazing landscapes to show us what's going on inside Victor.
It's like those nature documentaries, where there's a lone wolf howling and it's this big empty landscape. You get this feeling of being in awe, but also totally isolated.
Yeah. And that's Victor, right? He goes to these places for peace, but he also keeps meeting his creation there. It's like nature is reflecting his bad choices back at him.
Wow. So we've got these parallels with her time, the ethical dilemmas, and then the influence of nature. How does Frankenstein connect to the 21st century? Okay, so Frankenstein in the 21st century, it's like we're holding this map to the future, but it's kind of creepy.
Right. Those fears that Mary Shelley was writing about back then, they're even bigger now. Like, take artificial intelligence. We're making machines that can learn, that change, maybe even get smarter than us.
It's Frankenstein all over again. But instead of body parts, it's computer code.
Exactly. And we're like, Victor, trying to figure out how to control it. Can we really understand something that might be smarter than we are?
It's like when your computer does something weird, and you're like, is it broken or is it thinking? But way more intense. Now imagine that AI doing things that affect everyone.
Like those sci-fi movies where AI takes over. That's what Shelley was getting at. And it's not just AI, right? What about changing genes? We're talking about designer babies. We're like Victor Frankenstein in the lab.
Whoa, we're messing with life itself. Okay, so if Frankenstein is our warning, what do we need to learn? How do we deal with this stuff?
Well, Victor's big problem was his ambition. He went too far. So we need to be humble. He was so excited to show he could conquer death that he forgot to ask if he should.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
It's so true. He didn't think about the ethics at all.
Right, and we see that today too. Everyone wants the next big thing, but they don't stop to think about what it means. We have to balance progress with responsibility.
Be mindful, not just blindly chase what's possible. It's like those warning labels, proceed with caution. We need that for science.
And think about the creature. He wasn't born evil, remember? He became a monster because everyone was scared of him, wouldn't accept him. That's a huge lesson right there. Empathy matters, especially when someone's different. Totally. It's like when social media makes everyone so quick to judge. The creature reminds us to try to understand each other, not just push away what we don't get.
That's so important. Seeing the humanity in everyone, even when they seem strange, the world needs that more than ever.
Wow. This whole deep dive into Frankenstein has been amazing. This story is ancient, but it's about us right now.
That's because Mary Shelley was onto something, She made us think about human nature, about what happens when we get too powerful. And those things are still true in our crazy, tech-filled world.
It's like she gave us a map, but we get to choose where we go. So here's a question for everyone listening. If Victor Frankenstein was around today, what would he be building? And more importantly, would you do anything differently? Think about it. That's it for our deep dive today. Until next time, keep exploring.